Hold on a sec. Shalom, shalom. Welcome, welcome, world changers. Here we are again, another evening. And sorry, we had a little bit of technical difficulties there earlier. So, welcome, welcome. Hope you're all having an awesome evening or day wherever you are in the world. Yes, so here we are again, fellowship, reading the scriptures, talking about all these awesome things. And so I have a few comments as usual that I'd like to respond to, as well as, Lord willing, a little bit of a have a critical thinking quiz a little bit later as well. So let's see what we have here in the live chat before we get started. Poetic Santos says shalom. Shalom, Poetic Santos. Welcome, blessings, blessings. Thomas says shalom. Shalom, Thomas. Blessings multiplied to you. Calamento says shalom to all. Shalom, Calamentos. Blessings multiplied to you. Billy says shalom. Shalom, Billy. Welcome and blessings to you and yours. Child of One True King says, shalom, shalom, everyone. Shalom, Child of One True King. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And we have Praise Him says, blessings, everyone. Blessings, praise Him. Good to see you. Stephanie says, shalom, friends. Shalom, Stephanie. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. Yeah, so we got some comments here that I'd like to respond to. And I see you got at least a question or so in the live chat as well, so we'll get to that. And by the way, if you have any questions, now's the best time to enter it into the live chat. Just a second here. Okay, we are just okay, just a second here. Thank you for your patience, guys. Okay. Okay, just give me a second here. It has been a very, very busy day, that's for sure. Extremely busy for me. And so just trying to catch up on, just make sure everything is working fine here. Okay, all right. Okay, so yes, we have some questions that I'd like to get to. And I think what I'll do is I'll answer the questions, the first questions that came in, I'll answer those first, and then I'll get to the questions in the live chat. So first come, first serve here. Okay, let's see if I can get this. Okay. First question is from Flo. Flo asks, great topic. And this is in regards to the live stream that was streamed last night, that was replayed last night, actually. It's a great topic. Could you tell me your view on women wearing pants on the next live stream? Thank you. Okay. I do believe that the Holy Scriptures say that a woman should dress as a woman and a man should dress as a man. I do believe that the movement for women wearing pants, generally speaking, how it began was the feminist movement and also a movement towards like especially when it comes to pants that are not so well. Let me put it this way: tightly fitted pants as well, like a movement towards just appealing, okay, to the flesh, for lack of a better way of putting it. So on that grounds, I think that according to the Holy Scriptures, I think that it's fitting for women to wear, not to wear especially tight pants. I mean, you got different kinds of pants as well. You got some pants that are so loose you think that it's a dress. Okay, no, that's kind of like, that's a different. It's a kind of a different situation there. It's kind of hard to throw a blanket over everything. But generally speaking, and there are some exceptions, generally speaking, I think that women should be wearing clothes that are not revealing according to the Scriptures, that are not like a man's clothes. Okay, and I understand there are exceptions depending on the circumstances, but for the most part, I think that a woman should dress as a woman and dress as a lady, if you will. I think that that's what the Scriptures teach. Okay, Flo? Hope that answers your question. Thank you for asking. Now, we have another one here. Here's somebody... Bamidal, I believe this is his name. And this particular gentleman says, Peter, the head of the church, told us to listen to Apostle Paul. That's one way we proof Apostle Paul. Okay, here's the thing. There's a couple things, actually, that... there's a couple errors. I'm sorry to say that there are a couple errors in here. First of all, I will say this. Peter was not the head of the church. Okay. Trying to get this gentleman on here. Okay. Yeah, Peter was not the head of the church. Okay? Church history tells us, as well as the Book of Acts. Okay? The Book of Acts doesn't tell us explicitly, but the Book of Acts tells us in practice that James was actually the head of the church. James the Just. How do we know this from the Book of Acts? Read Acts chapter 15 and Acts chapter 21. Both of those chapters portray a church meeting, if you will, of the church leaders. And in both instances, we have James that brings down the law, so to speak. In both of them, James was the final authority. And I know that goes against what a lot of people believe, but I do believe that is the truth, because of what we read in Acts chapter 15, Acts chapter 21, as well as church history, such as church historian Hegesippus tells us that James the Just was the one who was the successor of Jesus, and he's the one that was the head of the church. Also, we have the Gospel of Thomas that tells us that James was the head of the church. Now, there are others as well, other extra biblical documents that tell us as well. But yes, James was the head of the church, not Peter. And I think that the reason why people think that Peter was the head of the church is because of what the synoptic gospels say about when Jesus asked his disciples, who do you say that I am? And one says, Peter said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said, you did not get this from flesh and blood. In other words, you did not learn this from anybody, but you learned this from God himself. And upon this rock, I will build my church. It's an error to believe that Jesus was implying that he was going to build something that was never existing before. It's an error. It's an assumption that's built on a shallow understanding of the text and of history. In Acts chapter 7, we have Stephen, and I'll pull this up. I like to, I don't want to burden you guys too much with all these kind of references, but I know sometimes it's warranted because a lot of people don't really know that what I'm saying is true, especially some people that are not familiar with how we think or what we do around here. Okay, so let's Acts chapter 7, verse 37. Start there. It says, by the way, in context, Acts chapter 7, this is the speech that Stephen gave just before he was stoned. Okay, Acts chapter 7, verse 37. So at this point in the discourse of Stephen, he's speaking about Moses. So he goes through basically the entire history of the children of God, or the children of Israel especially, starting right with Abraham, actually, the children of Abraham, I should say, going all the way through the history of the children of Abraham and children of Israel, the Jewish people. So Acts chapter 7, verse 37, he's at Moses, and he says, "This is that Moses which said unto the children of Israel, A prophet shall the Lord your God raise up unto you of your brothers, like unto me. Him you shall hear." So this is actually, this is a prophecy that we read about in Deuteronomy chapter 18. I'm just going by memory here. I'm not really scripted. So let's see if we can pull this up. Right here, verse 15. This is Deuteronomy 18:15. "The Lord your God will raise up unto you a prophet from the midst of you, of your brothers, like unto me. Unto him you shall hearken." Okay, so this is what Stephen was referring to. This is he that was in the church in the wilderness with the angel which spake to him in the Mount Sinai. So notice it says in the church in the wilderness. The church existed back in the days of Moses. When Jesus said to Peter, "Upon this rock I will build my church," he was not saying that he was starting anything new. That word build in the Greek is the same word that's translated edify in other parts of the New Testament. Edify. So in other words, I will build up, I will strengthen, I will fortify, I will edify. I will edify. So this is the thing. So when God, or I should say when Jesus said to Peter, "Upon this rock I will build my church," he wasn't talking about anything new. He was talking about, it's like this revelation, this solid knowledge that you have, this evidence that you have, this is what I'm going to use to build up the church that already exists and that has existed for thousands of years. The word church in the Greek is ecclesia, which simply means the ones who are called out. And in that context, it will be the ones that God called out. If God calls you out, it doesn't matter if you attend a brick and mortar building that has the name church on the front of the billboard. It doesn't matter. If God calls you out, then you are the church. You are the church. So Peter's not the head of the church. Just because Jesus said upon this rock, and again, was he even referring to Peter himself, or was he talking about the evidence that Peter based his judgment upon? Was he talking about the revelation of the Spirit? Okay, so the whole idea that Peter is the head of the church, based upon the whole thing that Jesus said, I will build upon this rock, I will build my church. There are multiple layers of error there, multiple layers of assumption with no evidence. Yes, upon this rock. What is the rock? You got to ask the question first, what is the rock? And just because Peter's name is Peter Petra, which means rock, doesn't mean that he is a rock. Doesn't mean he's the rock. It could mean that he was named after the rock. In fact, according to the Tanakh, the rock is the Lord, aka the Father. Yud He Waw He. The rock is God, according to the Tanakh. So perhaps when, assuming that that is historical, when Jesus said to, when Jesus asked them, who do you say that I am? And Peter, as he always does, Peter Piper piped up as he always pipes up. He's almost always the first one to speak in almost any circumstance he's involved in. So he's the first one to speak. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are the Messiah. Now, when Jesus said, upon this rock, what rock is he talking about? Is he talking about God? Is he talking about the Spirit of God that revealed to Peter who Jesus really was? Is that what he's talking about? And just because he named Peter Petra, rock, doesn't mean that is the rock. Like, for example, just because Eli in the Tanakh, okay, in the so-called Old Testament, we have a priest by the name of Eli. What does Eli mean? Eli means my God. Literally, my God. So just because his name was Eli doesn't mean that he is God. Just because his name is Petra, or Peter, which means the rock, doesn't mean that quote-unquote rock that Jesus was talking about is exactly Peter. Like, maybe Peter was named after the rock, after the Lord, after Yud He Waw He, Yud He Vav He. Maybe Peter was named after the Father, saying, yeah, the Father's the rock. The Lord is the rock. The Lord is my rock and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? So the Lord is my rock. Is Peter your rock? No, the Lord is my rock. So maybe Peter tapped into that rock, so to speak, got that revelation, and he was named after the rock, just like Eli was named after God himself. Yeshayahu means Yahoo my salvation, or Yahoo, the salvation of Yahoo. Salvation of Yahuwah, or Yahweh. Elijah, another one, means Yah is my God. Yah is my God. So because Elijah was named Elijah, does that mean that he is Yah? That he is literally Yahweh or Yahuwah, however you want to pronounce that? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that he was named after God. He has God's name in his name. So just because Peter was called the rock doesn't mean that he himself is the rock. No, God's the rock. Okay? So that's the first problem here we got it. Peter is the head of the church. Well, no, he's not the head of the church. James was the head of the church. And you said that Peter told us to listen to the Apostle Paul. And then you quoted it. Okay, so 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 15 and 16. It says, bear in mind that our Lord's patience means salvation, just as our dear brother Paul also wrote you with the wisdom that God gave him. He writes the same way in all his letters, speaking in them of these matters, his letters contain some things that are hard to understand, which ignorant and unstable people distort, as they do the other scriptures, to their own destruction. So what this says, Bamidel, what this says, brother, is nothing like what you say that it says. It doesn't say, well, first of all, you need to understand that 2 Peter, according to most, if not all scholars, 2 Peter was not written by Peter. It was a forgery. So when you read 2 Peter, don't automatically assume that it has to be 100% certain to be Peter himself that was the author. No. Just because it claims to be written by Peter doesn't mean that it is Peter. Now, I do have a video up called 5 Reasons Why Scholars Believe that 2 Peter is not written by Peter. Was not written by Peter. So there are reasons. There are good reasons why scholars believe that 2 Peter was not written by Peter. It's not like, well, they just don't like it, so they have to just, say something, they just have to attack it because they don't like it. No, scholars, reputable scholars, credible scholars are not that shallow, okay? They have good reasons for why they believe certain things. So you quote 2 Peter, assuming, again, there's another assumption there, assuming that Peter was the author, when most, if not all, scholars would tell you that Peter was not the author. It was a forgery, like many other books that were written in the early centuries that were claimed to be part of, books that claimed to be written by prominent people, prominent apostles, especially. Okay, this is something that we see in history a lot. People forging books in other people's names. Why would they do that? Well, who knows? Probably a whole laundry list of reasons why. Maybe it's the same reason why people like to forward chain letters around, Maybe it's just to get the right, let's just see how far this, we'll write a letter, an epistle. We'll call it the epistle from Peter. Well, what would Peter say? Well, grace and truth, grace and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. I was an eyewitness, all these kind of things. Let's just see how far our letter can go if we write it in the name of a prominent apostle, a famous apostle. I'm not sure exactly why 2 Peter was written, but it could have been something like that. It could have been. Okay, so number one, it wasn't written by Peter, according to most, if not all, scholars. Number two, you said that Peter, the head of the church, well, he's not the head of the church, told us to listen to the Apostle Paul. That's not what the author, the disputable author of 2 Peter says here. Where does it say here to listen to the Apostle Paul? Where does it say that? It doesn't say that. It does not even call him an apostle. It calls him a brother. It doesn't even call him an apostle. It just says brother. And I know that there is a theory out there that 2 Peter was written forged. This is just one theory. Don't misunderstand me. This is just one theory. That 2 Peter was written forged for the purpose of legitimizing Paul, to build a bridge between Peter and Paul. But it doesn't say listen to the Apostle Paul. It doesn't even say Apostle Paul. It says none of that. It just says that the Lord's patience means salvation, just as our dear brother Paul also wrote to you with the wisdom that God gave him. So what does that mean too? The first sentence, what does that mean? I mean, you can take this in a number of ways. You can say that the Lord's patience means salvation. Like, for example, look at Paul. Wow. I mean, the Lord's patience on Paul led to his salvation. Maybe that's what the author is saying there. Whoever the author is. He writes the same, he being Paul, this author claims that Paul writes the same way in all his letters, speaking in them of these matters. Now, this is another thing too. If you notice, there are 13 epistles, of Paul, at least 13 epistles that are attributed to Paul. The earlier epistles have a very similar tone and a very similar theme. You know, a lot about, for example, a lot about faith, not by works, grace, all that kind of stuff. So, but the last several letters that was written supposedly by the Apostle Paul, it's actually called secondary Paul or deutero Paul or pseudo Paul, even some people call it that, because there are 7 of those 13 letters that are supposed to be genuine Paul letters, whereas the other 6 are disputed. Whereas some say, no, I have evidence that it's not genuine, it's also a forgery, whereas other scholars would debate that, but it's debated. But here's the thing. Look at this. The author of 2 Peter says he, speaking of Paul, writes the same way in all his letters, speaking in them of these matters. Well, that's not true with all 13 epistles that we have. He doesn't write the same way. And this is one of the reasons why scholars would tell you that the last 6, or the disputed epistles of Paul, 6 epistles, including the pastoral epistles, by the way, and Ephesians, Colossians as well. I mean, there's 6 of them. One of the reasons being that it's so different than the earlier letters, the authentic letters. The authentic letters speaking so much about faith, so much about not by works, so much about grace, whereas the other epistles, like look at 1 and 2 Timothy, for example. Look at Titus, for example. Does he say anything about the law in there at all? Does he say anything about not by works? Like it's like a completely different theme. It's like a completely different song. It's like a completely different way of writing. It's like a completely different person. It's like a completely different author. So this is like, according to 2 Peter chapter 3, it says he writes the same way in all his letters, speaking in them of these matters. Well, here's my question to the author. I know that we can't get an answer, but if I could ask the author of 2 Peter, I would say, what letters are you talking about? Because we have no letters that are enumerated here. Wouldn't it have been good to have a list? Imagine the author wrote something like this. Paul writes the same way in Romans, Corinthians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and at least gives us a list, right? But he didn't do that. So 2 Peter, in and of its, just that one sentence is actually evidence against the Bible canon that we have. Because so-called Paul does not write the same way in all of his letters. So the question is, are they all really from Paul? Question. Anyways, so the author here says his letters contain some things that are hard to understand, which ignorant and unstable people distort, as they do the other scriptures, to their own destruction. Okay, so it doesn't tell us to listen to Paul. It just says that basically that God saved him. God gave him wisdom. He wrote some letters, and it's hard to understand his letters. That's all it says. It doesn't say that Paul is an apostle. It doesn't say that he tells the truth in everything. It doesn't say that we must listen to the Apostle Paul. It doesn't say that at all. Not at all. So, Bamidel, this does not support your claim. This does not support your claim. Okay, a couple questions from Corey. Says, Brother Chris, I don't know where you've seen that the Torah was in effect before Adam. Okay, so Corey, we talk about this all the time. Let's see if we can. I mean, okay. So, Corey, Psalm 119, verse 89, tells us that the word of the Lord is forever settled in heaven. When David sat down to write that text, the word of the Lord is forever. Your word, O Lord, is forever settled in heaven. What do you think he was thinking about? What was on his mind when he said, your word? Back in those days, the only really accepted scripture right across the board that was considered to be the word of God scripture was the Torah. The Torah forever settled in heaven. So number one, not only did David say the Torah, the word of God, which obviously would include the Torah, is forever settled in heaven. So that's the first clue. Number two is God told us literally scores of times. I've counted over 40. I know another gentleman that counted 65 times. I've counted 40 times within the books of Moses itself. I know someone else that counted 65 times within the Tanakh, that God said that the Torah is forever, eternal, perpetual, without end, permanent. That's number two. Number three is simple logic, okay? A lawgiver produces a law. The law is a reflection of the lawgiver. The law is just a written representation of the moral standard and character of the lawgiver. If the lawgiver changes, or if there are different lawgivers, then the law changes. But if the lawgiver never changes, and it's never replaced by other lawgivers, then the law never changes. So, God is a lawgiver. The Torah is his law. The Torah is his reflection. The Torah has no beginning because God has no beginning. The Torah has no end because God has no end. The Torah is perpetual in all of its works, just as God is perpetual. The Torah is from everlasting to everlasting because God is from everlasting to everlasting. The Torah is eternal, meaning no beginning, no end, because God is eternal. No beginning, no end. The Torah never changes because God never changes. Simple logic. And so we got those three strong points right there. And on top of that, number 4 is we see it in practice. We see it in practice. The Torah didn't start with Moses. Noah knew unclean animals from clean animals. How did he know if there was no Torah? Of course there was a Torah, because the Torah is eternal. There's no beginning to it because God has no beginning to him. And God never changes. He never needs an update. He never needs to change. He never needs to upgrade. It's the same forever. This is why the Torah is forever settled in heaven. Timeless. The Torah existed outside of time. How did Job know what sin was and what righteousness was? Because it says he did, okay? And he knew not only the difference between sin and righteousness, but he also knew exactly how to worship God, what to sacrifice. Like, he knew about sacrifices. Like, who knew? I mean, how would you know without the Torah? About any of this stuff. How would you know about sacrifices at all? How would you know what to sacrifice, where to sacrifice it, in what manner to sacrifice it? Same with Abraham. Genesis 26, verse 5. It says that Abraham knew Torah. It literally says he knew the Torah. Why? Because the Torah is eternal. There's no beginning of it. There's no end of it. Now, in the first several chapters of the book of Genesis, it's very, very vague, yes, and very uninformative. It doesn't really tell us a whole lot about the subjects that are being presented to us there. I do believe that the first several chapters of Genesis is more theological than it is historical. So we should not read Genesis chapter 1, 2, 3, 4 in the same way that we read Genesis chapter 50. Okay, it's a different Genesis chapters. At least I would say what starts around chapter 5, I would say. Chapters 5 through, now again, I'm not scripted here. I'm not doing, just right off the top of my head. Genesis chapter 5, the genealogies, to chapter 10, I would say is vaguely historical. Genesis chapter 11, a little bit more historical. Genesis chapter 12 through 50 is a lot more historical. So we should never take, let's say, at least the first 4 chapters of Genesis. We should never take any of that stuff and take it like and read it as if it's like, as if it tells us everything we need to know within the first 4 chapters. Of course not. No. It's a very vague theological exposition. That's what it is. So we know the Torah was in effect because his word is forever settled in heaven. Okay, Psalm 119, verse 89. We know because God said so. It's eternal, perpetual, to all generations. We know because of the logic that a lawgiver produces a law, and the law is a reflection of the lawgiver in the standards and character, in the moral standards and character. If we have a bad lawgiver, if we have an evil lawgiver, we have an evil law. We have a bad lawgiver, we have a bad law. If we have a good lawgiver, we have a good law. If we have an eternal, timeless lawgiver, we have an eternal, timeless law. Because that law is just a representation of the character, the eternal, timeless character of God. And it never changes. So there can't be a beginning to it, and there can't be an end to it. Unless God has a beginning, then we can say, okay, well, if the lawgiver has a beginning, then yes, the law must have had the law that lawgiver represents, or that law that represents the lawgiver, I should say, does have a beginning too. Okay? Corey says, because God even said that all plants and animals are for food. Hold on a minute. No, this is, again, is another assumption. We talk about this a lot as well. All does not necessarily mean all in an absolute universal sense. It does not. Okay, so I understand there are a lot of Christians out there that are very hyper-literal about things. This is what I would say. So let's say in Romans, it says all have sinned. So does that mean all? Like literally all? No, far from it. So, Christopher, what do you mean? How can the Bible be wrong? You're telling me that the Bible's wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the interpretation is what matters. All have sinned. What we need to do is ask first, what is that all? All of what? That's the first question we need to ask. All of what? Because if you say all have sinned, if it really means all, as you're taking this, Corey, as all plants and all animals are for food, if that really means all, if all have sinned really means all, that means God sinned. That means the angels of heaven sinned. That means the archangels sinned. Of course they didn't. No, they didn't sin. So all have sinned. That is assuming that you understand the context, that we're not talking about God, that we're not talking about his mighty angels and all the hosts of heaven. We're not talking about all these that outnumber the others, by the way. The all of God and his hosts and all of the mighty hosts of the angelic army that he has, that outnumbers the rest of the all. So all have not sinned. All of sinners have sinned, yes. All of, carnal, secular people have sinned, yes. So you need to ask the question first, all of what? Before you make an assumption that it's really all, as in all, all can, as if it's absolute universal, just butter over everything all. That's not what it means. Now, if you really think that all plants are for food, well, please do not think that. Do not think that. There are a lot of plants that are poisonous. So the question should be, all of what kind of plants? All of the edible plants are for food. Yes, all of the edible plants are for food. So in context, say every animal, say every of what? All of what animal? What kind of animal? Of course, the clean animals. That's what it means, not the unclean animals. We don't rip it out of context. Don't isolate it. Like I always say, like let's not be so narrow-minded we can see through a keyhole with both eyes. No, expand your field of thought and understand that there's a lot more to consider. We can't take just one verse or one chapter, or even one book, and isolate it from the rest and say, oh, well, look, it says all here. Yeah, but no. You can't say that. You can say it says all, but the question should be all of what? It's not all of as you think it is. No, it's all of what? All of the edible plants are for food. Yes. All of the edible, clean animals are for food. Yes. Not all plants. No way. And not all animals. No way. No way. And so Corey goes on to say, because God even said that all plants and animals are for food, this including swine. Corey, how can you say that? How can you say that God said it's including swine? This is, again, you're looking through a keyhole with both eyes, and you can't see every. Back up, okay? Back up. Look at the entire picture. Look in the entire picture. There are many times when God says, well, not God, I should say, but authors of of any book of the Bible would say all, but it does, of course, it doesn't mean all in an absolute universal sense. We spent the past 2+ years reading through the Bible, and I pointed all this stuff out as I read. There's way too much to get into here. I know I can't really do it justice here. All I can say is this: if you really, you just absolutely can't feasibly, logically interpret Scripture that way without going way off. I mean, you can't do that. Corey says, and correct me if I'm wrong, the same thing was said to Noah when when he brought animals on the ark, weren't they all for food as well? Absolutely not. No, not. Where'd you get that from, Corey? Where does it say that all the animals that were brought on the ark were for food? And even if it said that, I would say all of what kind of animals. But where's the evidence there? I don't see any evidence at all. Corey asks, so I watched your translate versus transliterate video. You mentioned blacksmiths. Maybe I misunderstood, but you said that blacksmith means your last name is Smith. Corey, I think you might be. What exactly did I say? Do you have a link? Do you have like a timestamp on that? I know what you're referring to. I hesitate to. I don't want to make any claims myself without knowing for sure exactly what I said. I can't say what I probably said without seeing the video. Thinking right now as to what I would say about something like this. The word Smith, or the surname Smith, is taken from these kind of occupations. So if you have a surname of Smith, it could be that was derived from an occupation like blacksmith. I think this is what you're getting at. I can't imagine myself making a claim saying that all blacksmiths are surname Smiths, or all Smiths are surname blacksmith. My belief on, I think that names should be translated more than transliterated, and so I think that this is what you're talking about. And Corey, I can't remember all the things that I said in that video, but I would say that as I believe, a lot of people misunderstand what a name is because of transliteration instead of translation. And we see this sometimes in Bible translations. Some Bible translations translate instead of transliterate. Like, for example, let me see if I can pull an example up here. This is an interesting piece right here. This is not necessarily what I was thinking about in my mind, but here's something. 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 20. So David came to Baal Perazim and defeated them there, and he said, "The Lord has broken through my enemies before me like the breakthrough of waters." Therefore he named the place Baal Perazim, which means the master or Lord of the breakthrough. And this is interesting because we got people who, I understand there are people who think that Baal is like, it's taboo. Don't ever, like, Baal or Baal is is one of those words that can be used to refer to different things and different people. Baal, I think, could mean anything from husband to master to Lord. And it's interesting that David would name a place Baal, Perazim, after the Lord, because the Lord broke through. The Lord broke through for David. So he called the place not Yahweh or Yahuwah breakthrough, or the breakthrough of Yahuwah or the breakthrough of Yahweh, but no, Baal. The breakthrough of Baal is what he called it. And so here David, he basically called the Lord, Yud-He, Waw-He, he called the Lord Baal in this passage. This is what makes it really interesting. Corey says, what does this mean? All I see a blacksmith is to be a profession, which is the kind of job I'd like to do for the rest of my life. Well, all right. So the point that I would be making, again, without actually listening to the video again and going through every single word that I said, what I believe is, because we have transliteration, a lot of people don't understand the translation, and they don't understand that a name is like, and here's a good example. A name is not just words on a paper. It's not just the way you pronounce something. That's why when it comes to Yud-He, Waw-He, Yud-He, Vav-He, Yahuwah, Yahweh, or even somebody who might say Yehovah, to me, it's all the same, because it's just different ways of pronouncing the same name. It's the meaning that makes all the difference. Same with this, Baal Perazim. The meaning is Lord of the Breakthrough. But you see, a lot of people, they're so shallow-minded, they cannot think beyond letters and phonetic sounds that come from earthly lips. They can't think beyond that. They say, oh, Baal, that's a different name than the Lord, than Yahweh or Yahuwah. That's a different name, so there's got to be a different God. No, it doesn't have to be. I do believe that Baal refers to different gods. It can be, just like the word God can refer to different gods. It's just the same. It's just the same way. So you can say, man, that guy's a great guitar player, man. He's like the god of guitar player. He's the god of guitarists. So you can name him the god of guitarists. But that doesn't mean that it's the same person as God, Elohim. You're using the same, you're using G-O-D. You're using the same, what do you call it, description maybe, title? But a lot of people, what they get in their minds is like, a name has got to be just like word. It's like it's the way you pronounce it. Like if you pronounce a name wrong, you're pronouncing the wrong name. No. A name is in the meaning more than anything else. Baal Perazim, the meaning of Baal Perazim, the Lord of the Breakthrough. And David named that place Baal Perazim after what God did. So he was referring to God when he called it Baal. Interesting. So surnames are, like, for example, McDonald. If my memory serves me correctly, McDonald would mean son of the ruler. Mick means son. Donald means ruler, or even world ruler, Donald. So son of the ruler or son of the world ruler. Any kind of Mick or Mac is the same way. Mick is son. Mac, son. Just variation of it. Like in Arabic countries, you got bin, bin or binti. Bin is son of, binti is daughter of. So bin Laden, son of Laden. Binti Laden would be the daughter of Laden. My point is this, that names are a lot more than just phonetic sounds that you make with your earthly lips. A name is in the meaning, not so much in how you pronounce it. It's in the meaning. What do you mean by that? Bin Laden, what do you mean by that? You mean, oh, the son of Laden. Oh, yeah, I know Laden, but he's, okay, yeah, I got it. It's the son of Laden, yes. So a surname could tell somebody who you are the son or the daughter of. McDonald. Or Bin, fill in the blank. Binti, Mac. It can tell you who you are the child of, who's your dad, okay? Or it could a surname could tell you the occupation, such as a smith. There are many different kinds of smiths. One of them would be a blacksmith. But if you're named a smith, then it could be that your ancestor was one of those smiths. What I mean is one of those smith occupations. And so they were named after their occupation. So, and then we got other names that are named after where you're from. We see this a lot in Dutch names. Van this, Van that, Vander, Vanda, Van de Graaf. You know, Van Grieken, these kind of names. From, Van means from. So a surname can tell you where you're from, what your occupation is, or who your dad is. And there's other different ways too. There's other different names as well, but those are like the majority of them. So what I'm saying is, when you transliterate a name, instead of saying, oh, that's the son of the world ruler, so you transliterate the son of the world ruler into McDonald. And so people don't think about the son of the world ruler when they hear about McDonald. And so people lose, it's like in their minds, there's a disconnect between the meaning of a name as opposed to the pronunciation of the name. Stephen says shalom. Shalom, Stephen. Sorry there, I missed you there earlier. It's kind of hard to get to. I know we got so much going on here in the live chat. Corey says, apparently Facebook is being pretty sketchy lately. I was on the phone with my brother the other day and talking about God and quoting Bible verses and got disconnected. Like disconnected as in where the call was just all beeps. Wow. Stephanie says, do you believe that people were more intelligent in the past than we are today? I've heard of ancient pictographs and writings of flying machines that were run by copper. Well, at least I would say I wouldn't doubt it. If not, even I think that that's probably the case. I think it seems to me like instead of society getting, I mean, we're getting better in a way in certain things. I guess you would say, like, if someone says we're better than we were 100 years ago as a society, I would say, you know, in what way? Some ways, yeah, we have advanced quite a bit, but other ways we have devolved a lot, for lack of a better term. I do believe that there were, well, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot of evidence of it, but I think that all things considered, I think that in the past we probably had technology that was more advanced than what we have today. Like, for example, in the book of Genesis, in the story of the Tower of Babel, for example, the Tower of Babel, I do believe it's talking about a communication system. It's not just some primitive set of people that just all spoke the same language, but rather a communication system, which could have been. I'm not saying for sure, but I mean, could have been like really highly advanced technology. Like today we're approaching it. We can go to another country with an app on our cell phone and get a real-time translation in any, not every, but in many different countries and many different languages could translate right on, in real time. It's just, it's amazing. But I think that the technology or the knowledge that the people had in the days of Babel was, I think, probably more advanced than what we have today, because even God was threatened. Even God said, listen, if we let these people communicate like they are, nothing would be impossible for them. That is how tight they were in their communication. That is how well they communicated. That's how well they translated. I understand that people think that the Tower of Babel was one language. I don't think it was one. I don't think it was Rishon. I think it was Echad. It uses the word in Hebrew Echad, which means unified. They were unified in their communication, not one language in a literal sense. Because not only is history telling us, like historians, linguists and people who study languages and the history of languages would tell you that it's impossible for them, if you take the story of the Tower of Babel in a very literal and Sunday school kind of overly simplistic way of interpreting it, it just won't. First of all, it just doesn't work historically, and it's impossible, and it just doesn't work. But like Genesis chapter 11 talks about the Tower of Babel. Genesis chapter 10 talks about different languages that already existed before the Tower of Babel. So I think that there were civilizations like Babel, like Sodom and Gomorrah, like perhaps even, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much truth there would be to the whole thing about the lost continent of Atlantis or anything like that. Lost civilizations, like who built the pyramids? Civilizations that used extremely advanced technology, but because of their advancement, because they were so advanced, they were also so proud, and they also had so much sin. God said, enough is enough. I'm going to completely wipe you off the face of the earth with all of your technology as well, and leave you as nothing but dust and ashes like Sodom and Gomorrah. Or, just wipe you out one way or another, with water or fire or whatever the case is, where there's no evidence of how you even did what you did. Like some of these megaliths that we hear of and see pictures of, some of these just magnificent and almost impossible structures that have been built by ancient people. And I know there's other theories like aliens built it and such like that. I think that it's at least possible that there was a very highly advanced society that it existed in Sodom and Gomorrah, in the tower, around the Tower of Babel, even the days of Noah as well, in other lost civilizations as well. That we have just ruins of. I would I think that that's probably why it's missing. That's why we don't have answers as to why or how Stonehenge was built, or the pyramids, or these other large structures, megaliths that were built. We don't have the answers for that, because all of the machinery or technology that was used for that is gone, because they were so advanced, they were so sinful. Advancement, right, in prosperity brings sin because of pride, right? First comes the prosperity, first comes the advancement, and because of that, people think they don't need God anymore, or they think they're just as good as God, or they just kind of put God up on a shelf, or they compartmentalize God into just Sunday morning, or whatever the case is, Saturday even for other people, or whatever day. They just put God in a compartment, if at all, because their lives are so comfortable in their prosperity and advancement. Pride sets in because of that, and then sin sets in, and then God just says, I'm done. You guys, I'm wiping you out completely. In thousands of years from now, people are going to look at what you guys did, some of the things that you built, and they're going to be scratching their heads saying, how did that happen? But nobody's going to even know how it happened, because I'm going to completely destroy your knowledge and your people, and just leave nothing but remnants, if even that. So I think that it's very, very probable that people were more intelligent in the past. I do think so. And we're heading that way again. Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie says, thoughtful way to put modesty. Thank you, Stephanie. Flo says, blessings all. Blessings, Flo. Welcome. Blessings to you and yours. John says, what makes someone a heathen by scriptural standards? Do heathen and sinner mean the same? Heathen is an old English word that means Gentile. If you look up the word heathen, let me demonstrate. Just demonstrate for you. You look up the word heathen. Okay. This is probably something like goy or goyim in the Hebrew, but I was specifically thinking about the New Testament. Yeah, it's goy. See, goy right here. So the heathen here in the Hebrew is goy, which simply means Gentile. Heathen is just it's just kind of like a harsher way of saying Gentile, in my opinion. In my opinion, calling someone a heathen is just a little bit more. It's harsher than to call someone a Gentile. Yeah. So, what makes someone a Gentile is really the question here by scriptural standards. If you don't care about the things of God, if you are not in covenant relationship with Him, then that would make you a heathen. If you're not in covenant relationship with God, that would make you a heathen. If it's not in your heart and in your mind to obey God, to serve Him, to worship Him, then you're a heathen. Gentile is almost like Jew. there are multiple meanings, multiple layers of multiple meanings to each of these words. Because a Jew, you can say a Jew is a Jew biologically. But a Jew is also a Jew spiritually. You can be a Jew and not be a Jew biologically, but still be a Jew because you converted to Judaism. Gentile, in the same way, I think it's the same kind of thing where it's like you can be a Gentile biologically, but God doesn't really look at the biological factor. He looks at the spiritual factor. God is a spirit. He looks at the spiritual factor. So it's like, are you a Gentile in your heart? Are you a Jew in your heart? Do you love and serve and follow God with all your heart? Then you're a Jew, even if you are not one biologically. Same with being a Gentile. So your question, do heathen and sinner mean the same? It all depends on what you mean by heathen, John. As I just explained, heathen/Gentile can mean multiple things. So in one way, yes, and another way, not so much. Depends on how you interpret that, John. John says, why did Jesus call the Pharisees and scribes hypocrites? Hypocrite is another one of those transliterations that should be translated instead of transliterated. So hypocrite, let's go have a look at it. It means to pretend. Simply means pretenders. It's really all that it means. A hypocrite is a pretender. Yeah, so go over to Matthew chapter 7, verse 5. Jesus is calling them, you hypocrite. But again, you look at the Greek here, hypocrites. Okay, so it is transliterated, as it says right here. It literally says transliterated instead of translated. So, and again, so this is just proving my point of what I said earlier, is that transliteration can be misleading. And many people are misled by transliterations as opposed to translations. I think that translation is better than transliteration. Transliteration is when you take a word from a different language and just transform it, carry it over, take the way that it's said in another language and put it into take it from one language into another language, but make it sound very, very similar or the same. That's transliteration. Translation is to take the meaning, not necessarily the way it's pronounced, but to take the meaning and carry the meaning over from one language to another, as opposed to the pronunciation over. Again, meaning, I do believe, meaning means more than transliteration. Literally speaking, meaning means more than transliteration. So why did Jesus call Pharisees and scribes hypocrites? Because they were pretending. They were pretending to be better than they were. That's why. If you look at the word hypocrite in the Greek, one who answers, an interpreter, an actor, stage player, okay, a dissembler, a pretender. So this is what it means, really. So what Jesus was calling them was simply, he was calling them pretenders, stage players, actors. There's actors. Thanks, John, for your question. Stephanie says, were you referencing Exodus 23:13? Okay, let's go take a look here. Exodus chapter 23, verse 13. In all things that I have said unto you, be circumspect, and make no mention of the name of other gods, neither let it be heard out of your mouth. Now again, yeah. So Stephanie, no, I wasn't referencing that, but that's a really good verse. I would ask the question again, what is a name? So what does it mean to make no mention of the name of other gods? Does that mean I can't say the word money? Does this forbid me from saying the word money? Or does this forbid me from saying the word car? Because, cars are gods to a lot of people. A lot of people, they worship cars, they worship houses, they worship money, they worship certain people. So basically, almost everything you can imagine can be, and I think probably is somewhere in the world, a god. So if you take this in a literal way, if you take this verse in a literal way and say, and if you interpret name as something that is pronounced without the meaning of it, just letters and phonetic sounds, like Baal, without knowing what it really means, then this verse would prohibit you from saying pretty much almost everything. You couldn't speak at all. Really couldn't speak at all. So what I would say is, what does it mean what does name mean here? And I understand as that a name is the meaning, is not so much like for example, the great goddess Diana. Okay, so someone can say, oh, we better not say Diana because that's the name of another goddess. Well, it is the name, but that's not really the name per se. So the name of the great goddess Diana would be now assuming Diana would be a feminine god, who she really is. What is she all about? What is her character? What does she stand for? What is her narrative? That is her name. Not just D-I-A-N-N. No. Not just letters and pronunciation, but rather, what does it mean? What does this goddess Diana mean? What is it about her? Her character, her personality, how she does things, her narrative, her quote-unquote gospel, her Torah. That's all in the name. So as I understand this particular verse to mean that we should not, you should not, again, taking the example of the great goddess Diana, if you will, we should not be furthering the narrative of that God, furthering the narrative of who that God is and what that God does. Basically, furthering, I'm trying to think of another word here. It's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, I can't think of it right now. It starts with a P, I know that. Not furthering, but anyways, yeah. Like, for example, Hollywood. You can say that Hollywood is a god to some people. Hollywood's a god. Does that mean we can't say, Hollo, Hollywood? We can't say that word? No. I think what this means is we should not we should not further the narrative of Hollywood. We should not be a carrier of the character of that God. We should not perpetuate. We should not perpetuate what that God is all about. Not that we can't mention the name, as we know the name, but what that God really means, what's the actual purpose of that God, and the mission, the narrative of that God. That's how I understand that. Stephanie says authority is more important than the word. People say Jesus and cast out a demon. His name wasn't Jesus, and would have been Yeshua / Yahshua. Still, demons cast out in his original name too. Yeah. Back to I talk about this on a semi-regular basis. Demons respond to again, this is it's all to do with the mean. Like, who do you mean? Who do you mean when you say Jesus? Now, historically speaking, as I understand it, if you're just going by the pronunciation of it, we got Yehoshua in the Tanakh, Joshua, and that was shortened down to Yeshua. And Yeshua, now I understand historically speaking, Yahshua is not a thing at all. It's nowhere found in history. Nowhere. That's something I think that was made up in recent years. Yahshua. But anyways, Yeshua was shortened down to Yeshu. So around the time when Jesus, if you will, walked this earth, we had Yeshua or Yehoshua shortened to Yeshua, shortened down to Yeshu. And so he was probably called by Yeshu, or some variation of that. If we were to get in a time machine and go back to 25 AD, and we were to follow him around or talk to him, I think that it would be, his name would have been pronounced Yeshu or Yesu or Iso. This depends. There are different dialects, even amongst the different communities that he went. There are different dialects. So they would have been pronouncing his name differently. I like to say this. You look at Judges chapter 12, I think it is. Again, trying to remember. Judges chapter 12. Verse 5. And the Gileadites took the passages of Jordan before the Ephraimites. And so it was that when those Ephraimites which were escaped said, "Let me go over," that the men of Gilead said to them, "Are you an Ephraimite?" If he said no, then you should say to him, "Now say Shibboleth." And if he said Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it right, then they took him and slew him in the passages of Jordan. And there fell at that time. Okay, so here's my point. What does this passage teach us? This teaches us that even amongst the children of Israel, even in just within that little tiny part of the world, even amongst the children of Israel, even in the holy people of God, they pronounce names differently. So Ephraimites would pronounce it Sibboleth instead of Shibboleth. What's my point here? My point is that even amongst the tribes of Israel, they pronounced names differently, and nobody got their nose out of joint because of it. I'm sure when Yeshua was going around from town to town, speaking to people from different tribes, he probably got his name called in many different ways, with different dialects, different intonations, different accents, different variations of Yeshu, Eso. I remember Sair several months ago. Sair was in the live chat, and he's from Turkey, and speaking Aramaic, which would have been Yeshua's native language. So I asked Sair, how do you say Jesus in Aramaic? Iso. He said, Iso. That's how you say Jesus. Like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. So if that's accurate, then that would have been how the name of Jesus would have been pronounced back in those days. Yeso, or something to that effect. Yeso, Yeshu, Isa, Iso. These kind of variations, I don't think Jesus would be I don't think he would be that way. I don't think he would go, no, you pronounce my name differently, I'm not going to respond to you. I'm sure people pronounce his name different all kinds everywhere. And I just don't think he would be that much of an idiot. I really don't think he would be that much of an idiot to say, oh no, I'm not going to respond to you. You pronounced it Yesu. It should be Yesu. It should be Yesu, or it should be Yashu. Give me a break. Like, people call me Chris or Chris, Christopher, Christoph, Christa. They call me all kinds of different ways of pronouncing my name. I answer to them all because I understand there are different people, they speak different ways, they have different accents, they have different ways of pronouncing my name. I'm not going to get my nose out of joint because of it. I'm not going to correct them and say, oh no, you got to say exactly right, or else I'm not going to listen to you because you got to say exactly, because if you say Chris when you should be saying Chris, then you must be talking to a different person. I don't think that the Lord would be that much of an idiot. So we got Yesu, Isa, Isu, Yeshu. Okay, back in the first century. Greek, if you notice in the New Testament, they not always, but very frequently add an S at the end of names. Lucas, Marcus, Matthias, Ananias, Jesus. Jesus. So instead of going Isu or Yeshu, it'd be Jesus. That's just the way that it happens. From the Aramaic to Greek, they add the S on it. And over a period of several hundred years, it just evolved from going from Jesus, and then that I or Y at the beginning eventually became a J, because J was pronounced as an I in the early English as well. You look at like 1611, King James Version 1611. It's hard to read because it's like the I's are the J's, or the Y's are the J's, and the I's and it's like the J, Y, and I are all mixed up. So over the course of hundreds of years, it went from Isu to Jesus to Jesus. Jesus. It's the same name. Exactly the same name. It's the same person, of course. It's just a different way of pronouncing it. It just evolved over the thousands of years, and I think that Jesus was there for the entire evolution of it. I don't think that he at any point in time stuck his fingers in his ears and go, "Oh, that's it. I'm not going to respond to you. You pronounced it wrong." I don't think he's going to do that. Especially when people do it with honesty. I mean, if people just start, you know, mocking by calling different names or whatever, pronouncing a name differently and mocking, of course, that's a different story. But something like just, in a 2,000-year evolution from Isu to Jesus, no problem. It happens. 2,000 years. It'd be a really slow process, but yeah, for sure. People in different parts of the world pronounce his name differently. Even, of course, Jesus, Isu, Isa in the Hebrew, or in the Arabic, Isa. It's the same name, just different name, just different way of pronouncing it. Isa, Yeshu, same name. Now I do understand though that the Jews, because of the whole thing with how the church went anti-Semitic, so the Jews kind of put a stop to the Yeshu name. So you don't really see much Yeshu anymore like that, which is unfortunate. Now, I don't believe that it's true in any sense of the word. Don't believe that Yeshu is an acronym. And there's this thing going around the church now. They're going around Messianic and Hebrew roots movement circles that Yeshu is an acronym. May his name be blotted out forever. It's an acronym that means that. No. If you look at it historically, there were many people by the name of Yeshu. They were called Yeshu back in those days. Just like Josh, as opposed to Joshua. Same kind of thing. Flo says, I think you mean propagate. Thank you, Flo. John says, you think Sodom and Gomorrah were technologically advanced? I don't know, but I really don't know. But I think that it's very, very possible. Very possible. You read about how Sodom and Gomorrah in the scriptures were very, very rich cities. It says that it was like the garden of the Lord, like fullness of bread. Obesity was a going concern back in those days in Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, and it says people were idle. They didn't really do much of anything because they didn't have to, because they were so blessed. I can't imagine a place that's so blessed being technologically challenged. I think that you look at, let's say, for example, in some of the places in the world today that's very, very prosperous, they're also technologically advanced. Look at the countries of the world, say the top 5, let's just say the top 3 countries in the world today that would be the most prosperous countries. They also have some really powerful technology as well. I think that Adam and Eve, per se, were very well endowed with being very prosperous and very well blessed in knowledge and such as well. I don't think God created cavemen. I think he did a good job to begin with. Okay, let's have a look here. Another question from Corey. Shalom, Brother Chris. So I have a question. You know how Jews have curls on the sides of their head? Yes, I do, Corey. When those curls get longer, that indicates how wise a person is. Wait a second. Where do you get that from, Corey? Where do you get that from, Corey? I've never heard that. Does this also indicate the same thing with a man's beard? Well, first of all, I think, again, Corey, you need to ask, is this true? What's the source? Let's not make assumptions here. Is this true? What's the source to this? Maybe it is true somewhere. I don't know. I've never heard of it. Never, ever heard of this kind of thing. For those of you who don't know what Corey's talking about, you might see some of these like really ultra-Orthodox Jews that have these curls that come down. The reason why they do that is, again, interpretation. They interpret the Torah when it says, do not cut the sides of your head. They interpret that, or the corners, excuse me. Do not trim the corners, I think it means. So they interpret that as the corners. And so that's why they don't trim it. So to me, Corey, longer payout is called payout, by the way. The curls, payout, longer payout. To me, Corey, means that it just grew longer. That's all that it means to me. So I don't know how to answer that, seeing that you premise one question upon something that I've never heard before. It says, should us men keep our beards grown out to show how wise we are? No, a beard does not show how wise a person is. I mean, you can have people without beards be a lot wiser than people that have beards, or you can have people with beards wiser. It really doesn't make any difference. It's like, it's like it doesn't matter how long your hair is or how long your fingernails are, and that doesn't tell you what's in your, what kind of character you have or the wisdom or the knowledge that you have. It has nothing to do with that, Corey. Corey says also, how can we tell the difference between a Jew and someone who adopts the practices of a first century Christian? How can we tell the difference between a Jew and someone who adopts the practices of a first century Christian? What do you mean by Jew, Corey? And what do you mean by Christian? Corey? Corey, are you still around there, Corey? You're just wondering what you mean by Okay, just give me a second here. Alan says, shalom, everyone. Shalom, Alan. Welcome, welcome. Hannah Banana says, how are you? I'm pretty good so far. How are you, Hannah Banana? Flo says, I don't know if Christopher answered my question concerning women wearing pants. I came on late. I did, Flo. Yeah, you could see. I think yours was the first one I answered. Speaking of Hannah, Hannah, if you are around, if you can come to the keyboard and get ready to bless us with a little bit of music while we engage in a critical thinking question, another critical thinking question. That would be awesome. Yeah, Corey, I'm not seeing a response from you. I'm not sure if you're still around or not. Okay, we have a critical thinking quiz. So here it is. Gabe was having a terrible time lining up his tin soldiers. He didn't have all that many, fewer than 100, but he couldn't seem to arrange them on parade properly. He kept having odd numbers left over. He tried rows of 5, and there were 4 left over. He tried rows of 6, and 4 left over. Rows of 7, 1 left over. He finally decided to have a very narrow parade and arranged them 4 abreast. That worked. What's the smallest number of toy soldiers he could have had? I'll read that one more time. Gabe was having a terrible time lining up his tin soldiers. He didn't have all that many, fewer than 100. But he couldn't seem to arrange them on parade properly. He kept having odd numbers left over. He tried rows of 5, and there were 4 left over. He tried rows of 6, 4 left over. Rows of 7, 1 left over. He finally decided to have a very narrow parade and arrange them 4 abreast. That worked. What's the smallest number of toy soldiers he could have had? Okay. Okay, so Hannah's getting ready here, and Hannah will bless us with some beautiful live music for you guys. Okay. You ready, Hannah? All right. Okay, so Hannah is going to bless us here, and while we try to figure this out, here is Hannah. Thank you, Hannah. That was beautiful as always. Thank you for blessing us with your talent. Okay, all right. So we're going to read this one more time, and then we'll see what you guys have in the live chat, and then we'll get to the answer. Let's do this again. Gabe was having a terrible time lining up his 10 soldiers. He didn't have all that many, fewer than 100, but he couldn't seem to arrange them on parade properly. He kept having odd numbers left over. He tried rows of 5 and there were 4 left over. He tried rows of 6, 4 left over. Rows of 7, 1 left over. He finally decided to have a very narrow parade and arrange them 4 abreast. That worked. What's the smallest number of toy soldiers he could have had? Okay, so let's see what we got here. In the live chat, we got Calamento says 64. We got Flo says 33 rows of 3. He had 99 altogether. Says, don't laugh at me, everyone. Flo, you're amazing. You're awesome, Flo. Don't worry about that. Whoops. 4 abreast. I missed that one. Okay. China One True King says, I'm not touching this one. Flo says, me too, China One True King. I'm tired from work. Okay. All right. Thomas says 64. And China One True King. Yeah, okay. Well, all right. Nice going, everyone. As always, you guys are amazing. You guys are awesome. You guys are great. All right. The answer to this is 64. So, congratulations, Thomas. Congratulations, Calamentos. You got it right. That's amazing. Amazing, amazing. Okay. All right, then. So, as always, you guys are awesome. I'm going to wrap this up now, and we'll do it again tomorrow, Lord willing. Same time, same place. All right, guys. Okay. All right. You guys are amazing. Corey, maybe you're a little bit behind there, Corey, on your live stream. Not sure. This says, wow, we have to think outside the box on this one. Doesn't say how many soldiers he had exactly. Okay. Yeah, I know sometimes the live stream gets lagging behind there a little bit. Anyways, guys, you guys are awesome. You guys are amazing. Least common denominator, Thomas. Yeah, you got it. You got it. So if you haven't already, please leave a like, please subscribe and follow, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow. Keep on calling on him, and he will show you great and mighty things. Amen. Steve over there on TikTok and Voice of One, welcome, welcome, welcome. Yeah, so we're just closing out for tonight, but we'll be back for tomorrow, Lord willing, at 7 p.m. Eastern. All right, everyone. You guys are amazing. You guys are awesome. Love you guys. As always, I pray the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, lift up his countenance upon you, and give you wonderful, wonderful shalom. Amen, amen. See you guys tomorrow. Yes, see you.